Student self-assessment. Accomplished teachers encourage students to set high goals for themselves and teach them how to evaluate their own progress toward English language acquisition. Teachers know that developing their students' capacity for self-assessment enhances students' decision-making skills, promotes their ability to discern connections between classroom activities and real-world experiences, and fosters their growth as independent, reflective learners of English. Knowing that student self-assessment elicits valuable information that teachers can use to make instructional decisions regarding students' English language development, accomplished teachers provide individual and group feedback that models language skills students need to self-assess and self-correct and guides them in adjusting their learning strategies. Teachers, for example, might instruct students in creating their own rubrics to evaluate specific aspects of English. Teachers clearly communicate their expectations for students' language learning so that students can judge how well their work meets those expectations. Teachers, therefore, help students define and understand their linguistic progress and motivate students to take responsibility for their own language learning. English language proficiency assessment. Accomplished teachers understand the purpose of proficiency assessments with regard to current local, state, and federal guidelines for monitoring the progress of students' English language development. Teachers collect and analyze data from formal sources. They know how to examine such assessment instruments critically and understand their uses and limitations in the practice of informed teaching. Teachers are knowledgeable about the psychometric properties of standardized tests when administered to English language learners, including large-scale content-based assessments, academic language proficiency assessments, reading placement tests, and formative instructional assessments. Teachers are also involved in interpreting language proficiency assessment results as they pertain to the reclassification of students' English language proficiency. Aware of which students may be ready to exit language support programs, teachers carefully monitor these students' language proficiency assessment results. Teachers collaborate with content teachers, guidance counselors, and others to share current information when students are reclassified as no longer in need of language support. If reclassified, students are eligible for accommodations on state content area tests. As necessary, teachers advocate for these students to receive appropriate accommodations. Standardized content assessment. Accomplished teachers work collaboratively with school staff to confirm the eligibility of English language learners to participate in content area assessments and ascertain that students are assessed fairly. Teachers understand test validity and reliability and are able to explain to colleagues how these concepts relate to the unique features of evaluating English language learners. Additionally, teachers examine content area assessments in collaboration with content teachers to determine where students might have difficulties and to identify keywords that English language learners need to know. Understanding the influence accommodations have on student outcomes and on test reliability, teachers of English language learners collaborate with content area teachers, educational specialists, counselors, and others to ensure that students have accommodations that address their needs without compromising an assessment's validity. Teachers are aware of current research on the efficacy and appropriateness of accommodations on assessments, as well as state and local policies regarding accommodations available to their students. Teachers therefore collaborate with colleagues to select testing accommodations. For example, they recognize the inappropriateness of providing bilingual dictionaries as an accommodation for students not literate in their primary language and suggest other appropriate accommodations. Assessment for special purposes. Accomplished teachers make certain that English language learners receive appropriate assessment and identification for a variety of programs and services and advocate for the proper assessment and placement of all students. Teachers ensure that they are part of the early intervention process when a student is in need of academic intervention. In advocating for appropriate referrals for English language learners, teachers adhere to local, state, and federal guidelines concerning the assessment of students with special needs. Teachers help administer and monitor the efficacy of interventions for students at risk of academic difficulties. After academic interventions are fully administered and monitored, teachers work as part of a team to determine whether students should be assessed for special services, recommending assessment in primary languages as appropriate. They advocate for the fair assessment of their students regarding placement in special education and ensure that the analysis of assessment results reflects their students' status as English language learners. Furthermore, teachers advocate for their students to receive access to gifted and talented programs. Accomplished teachers realize that English language learners may be underrepresented in Accomplished teachers realize that English language learners may be underrepresented. Accomplished teachers realize that English language learners may be underrepresented in gifted and talented education, and they assist in identifying potential students for such programs, helping colleagues recognize when an English language learner makes extraordinary academic progress that might not be immediately noticed because of limited language proficiency. When students are considered for special needs placement, including gifted education, teachers collaborate with other professionals at their school to provide insights on students' progress in the acquisition of English. They advise colleagues about such background variables as the student's level of proficiency in the primary language, amount of prior formal education, and cultural factors that might affect learning. In all cases, teachers advocate for appropriate actions to meet their students' needs as English language learners. Substantive assessment information for families and others. Accomplished teachers are skilled at presenting, summarizing, and interpreting assessment data from a range of evaluative tools in meaningful and valid ways to various audiences, ensuring that all information is clear, understandable, and connected to instructional goals. Teachers use assessment results to provide frequent, specific information to professional colleagues, families, school officials, and other decision makers about each learner's progress and performance. To that end, teachers employ appropriate methods, including the most current technology, for collecting, summarizing, and reporting assessment data to demonstrate that learning occurs. Teachers communicate assessment information to families, for instance, about students' accomplishments, successes, and needs for improvement, as well as ways to attain higher goals. They elicit parents' insight about their children's interests and ways to motivate them, and teachers respond thoughtfully and thoroughly to parents' concerns. Teachers know that such efforts encourage involvement and promote family input into the educational process by providing families with opportunities to evaluate program effectiveness and to help determine future directions for improved instruction. Reflection. Accomplished teachers reflect on their strong foundation in assessment as it applies to language testing and their use of all available assessment data to inform daily classroom activities and provide students with access to content and educational opportunities. Teachers reflect on multiple evaluation methods to interpret student understanding and use of language and choose those evaluation methods that provide the most valuable information about students' learning and English language development. Teachers reflect on the effectiveness of their instructional decisions, using information gathered from students' progress and from lessons to set high, worthwhile goals for student language and content learning, and to design instructional strategies appropriate to students' needs. Accomplished teachers think carefully about the best ways to provide clear communication to students, parents, colleagues, and the educational community regarding the purposes and results of assessments.